Good evening. I'm Rich Lee, an associate professor at the Jandoli School of Communication here at St. Bonaventure University. And welcome to the Jandoli School's live report on primary night, March 10th. I'm joined by Mike Hogan to my right and Joe Cirillo to my left. What you're about to see is a collaboration between several entities at the Jandoli School. The Jandoli Institute, our new research center, TAPinto Greater Olean, an online newspaper staffed by Jandoli School students, and of course, SBU-TV, which is making it possible for all of you to watch this tonight. Just to put the race into context, primary's been going on for several months. Been debates, primaries, caucuses, and it began with a very diverse field of more than 20 candidates, and it's been whittled down now basically to just two people who are viable candidates, and that's Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders and former Vice President Joe Biden. And in the first few primaries and caucuses, Bernie Sanders did quite well. He was the leader, not with a majority. He was winning with about 35, 36%. Joe Biden, on the other hand, was not performing well, was not among the leaders in any of the early primaries or caucuses. The campaign was kind of on life support until they got to South Carolina. He was hoping that he could at least become a viable candidate again in South Carolina. And not only became viable, he did much better than expected, so well that it led to decisions by some of the other candidates who looked at the numbers and realized there just wasn't a path to victory. So Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, Tom Steyer all dropped out. Bernie Sanders continued to do well last week at Super Tuesday. After Super Tuesday, Elizabeth Warren dropped out of the race, so did former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg. And that kind of brings us to tonight, where 6 states are holding primaries or held primaries today. 352 delegates are up for grabs. Those states were Michigan, Mississippi, Missouri, Idaho, North Dakota, and Washington State. Overall, so far in the delegate count before tonight, Joe Biden had a small lead. He had 664 delegates. Bernie Sanders had 573. So it's a margin of less than 100 delegates. And you need 1,900 delegates to win the nomination, so the math just isn't there for someone to win tonight. But I think we're going to get a much clearer picture of who's in line to get the nomination based on what we're seeing so far. It looks like it's going to be a very good night for Joe Biden, and I'm going to turn to Joe for a few minutes because Joe's been looking at the results, and actually the first 2 states we heard from were Missouri and Mississippi, and they both were good states for Joe Biden.
Yeah, so far pretty lopsided contests, and I would say to call tonight a good night for the former vice president is a bit of an understatement. Mississippi, no surprise there. It was called as soon as the polls closed at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Don't forget, that's a state that Hillary Clinton had her biggest margin of victory in back in 2016, defeating Senator Sanders in Mississippi by 66 points. I expect the former vice president to win by potentially up to 70 points in Mississippi tonight. It's not a matter of just winning the state for him. It's a matter of can he sweep or come close to a sweep of the state's 36 delegates. And then Missouri, one of the tightest races in 2016. Missouri, along with Iowa, were won by Hillary Clinton with just 0.2% of a margin of victory. Well, Joe Biden winning Missouri pretty lopsidedly, probably at least a 15, 20-point victory there tonight.
Yeah, so 2 different states, different scenarios in the past, but Biden is pretty much doing well. As you said, maybe an understatement, say he's doing well, like, really cleaning up in both of those states.
Yeah, well, in Mississippi, it's a bit more of the same. You saw big victories for him in Alabama, Arkansas, South Carolina. Those southern states with primarily African-American electorates in the Democratic Party, that's where Joe Biden thrives. That's his stomping ground. Don't forget, this goes to before his alliance, his work with President Obama. Joe Biden has been a champion for the African-American community for literally decades by now, and it's really paying off so far this primary season. Missouri's a bit different. A lot of the Democratic voters, in fact, about 2/3 of them in Missouri are white, and you saw Senator Sanders back in 2016 had a lot of success among white male voters in Missouri with a college degree. Won 2/3 of their votes back in 2016. So far, that same demographic tonight, Joe Biden has won the majority. So while Mississippi is more of the same, he has completely flipped the script in Missouri.
Yeah, really fascinating. I know you're going to be following some stuff on social media at the big board for us, so we'll look forward to that. I'm
Absolutely.
going to turn to Mike Hogan for a little bit now. And Mike, you've been looking at Michigan, and Michigan is the biggest prize tonight, 125 delegates. It's a state that Bernie Sanders won kind of surprisingly, back in 2016. Wasn't expected to win, but what's happening in Michigan tonight?
Yeah, Bernie's hoping for that same result tonight, but unfortunately for him, Joe Biden is running away with it. As predicted, every poll that I looked at ahead of today had Joe Biden up by double digits. Right now, Bernie Sanders only winning in 3 counties. Joe Biden total domination has 53% of the vote to Sanders. Sanders is 39. 34 delegates for Biden, only 19 for Sanders. And Joe is going to give us a look at how Michigan looks on the big board.
Thanks, Mike. You know, if you look at the state of Michigan right now, it's completely different for Senator Sanders than it was 4 years ago when, despite being a double-digit underdog to Hillary Clinton in all of the polls, he pulled out the win. So far, down 14 points with about 63% of the vote being reported. He won 73 of Michigan's 83 counties 4 years ago. Here tonight, only leading in 3 out of the 83. Grand Rapids, of course, one of the largest cities in Michigan, in Kent County. Sanders holding a slim, about 3-point lead there. But you look at what I call the Bermuda Triangle of Michigan, where elections are won, where elections are lost. It all starts in Wayne County, home of Detroit, and Joe Biden has a convincing 13-point lead there. Then you go up north to Oakland County, where he's dominating. Hillary Clinton won Oakland County by just 5 points in 2016. The former vice president leads by 20 points in Oakland County tonight. And then just to the right, Macomb County, where he holds an 11-point lead. Macomb County's relevance here this evening on the night of Michigan's Democratic primary, their mayor, Michael Taylor, who is a Republican who endorsed Donald Trump in the general election 4 years ago, came out earlier today, endorsed Joe Biden, and so far his constituents are following his lead. Mike?
Yeah, Joe, you mentioned Michael Taylor. Joe Biden also has a couple of other big endorsements in Michigan. Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, endorsed Biden last week. That was big for him. A couple of other smaller ones as well. Garland Gilchrist, lieutenant governor, he voted for Bernie Sanders in 2016, but he's going for Biden this year. And also Lori Goldman, founder of Michigan's Femmes for Dems, she is also endorsing Joe Biden, wanting Trump to be out of office. Much like Taylor, that seems to be the case with a lot of Biden's endorsements this year.
Yeah, well, I want to follow up on that because what we've been seeing in a lot of the polls among Democratic voters, when the voters are asked, who do you favor, who do you agree with most on the issues, and who do you think is the best candidate to beat Donald Trump, candidates seem to say, beating Donald Trump is more of a priority than electing someone who I agree with on the issues. And Joe, I'm kind of seeing what happened in Missouri. Maybe, like you said, we expected him to do well in Mississippi, but you think it's the electability factor that's playing a role in his fact that he's doing so well in Missouri?
I absolutely do. In the 3 days following Super Tuesday, a poll of 1,200 Democratic voters was conducted by CNN. And in terms of the category of who has the best chance to beat Donald Trump, Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders, 66% of them chose the former vice president. Just 26% chose the senator from Vermont.
Yeah. One interesting development, which may become more interesting as the campaign goes on, we're getting reports that Missouri had a lighter turnout than normal, and there was some thought that concern about the coronavirus may have contributed to that. And if that moves forward, do you think a low voter turnout is going to hurt or hinder Joe Biden?
I don't think so. And I also heard another thing about Missouri's polling places today where there were some technology issues.
Oh, okay.
So I think that may have played more of a factor than the coronavirus. I read on an article, news source from St. Louis, Missouri's biggest city, where there was someone estimated around 50 to 100 people left the polls because they got frustrated with the technology there. So I think that may have played a bigger role than the coronavirus scare.
Yeah, and I think we're going to have to keep an eye on that. That's a story which is almost eclipsing the political story, which has been the main story in the country for months, and it's getting to the point. I think some of the candidates even canceled their campaign rallies today. So but just in terms of who's winning, it's very clear it's a great night for Joe Biden. So we spent this first segment of the show looking at some of the states that were polls closed early, actually the 3 M's, Michigan, Missouri, Mississippi. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to take a look at the other states where results are coming in a bit later. That's Idaho, North Dakota, and Washington State. So thanks for joining us so far. Stay tuned. We're going to take a short break, regroup. My name is Rich Lee. I'm here with Joe Serrallo and Mike Hogan.
Today I'm going to talk to you about physics. Come on in, girls. Let's go. This is the first rocket to get humans to Mars. Really tall. I'm a rocket structural engineer, designing and building parts of the rocket. You are the generation that will be stepping foot on Mars. Do I have a group of astronauts on my hands? Yes. You can become a rocket scientist or whatever else you want to be.
If you smoked, get scanned. Talk to your doctor or learn more at savedbythescan.org.
When I was growing up, my mom was extremely tidy. We were trained to put things back where we got them from. One day, when I walked into my mom's house, I felt like I walked to someone else's house. There was stuff everywhere. And just growing up the way I grew up and to see this transition was very alarming.
When Sean talked to me, it was a wake-up call, and that's when I went to the doctor.
I felt accomplished after I got my diploma. It made me feel that I could take on whatever challenges life throws at you.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
They call me Prince like I'm royalty or something. But the places I've lived ain't no palaces. So I don't need grilled salmon or a new scratching post. Just give me a cardboard box and a can of tuna and we're good. You can even change my name. I'm cool being the kitty formerly known as Prince.
Welcome back. I'm Rich Lee from the Jandoli School of Communication, reporting on the March 10th primary results with Joe Sorello and Mike Hogan. We spent the first part of the show looking at Michigan, Missouri, and Missouri, where the results came in, all good states for Joe Biden. We're going to take a look now at a couple of states where polls closed a bit later, so we don't have complete results, but certainly we can talk about all of them a bit. And Mike, I want to start with you. You've been taking a look at some of what we're hearing for Idaho. Certainly no results yet, but how does it look in Idaho?
Well, there's no results in yet, as you mentioned. Sanders won 78% of the caucuses in 2016 in Idaho. But I was just talking to you during the break, and I mentioned that Idaho and North Dakota are smaller states. And if Sanders is falling behind in Michigan, he's already lost Michigan, Mississippi, and Missouri, that could be an issue if he doesn't get Washington, because there are only 14 delegates up for grabs in Idaho. So, and it's similar situation in North Dakota.
Yeah, North Dakota also a state, with not that many votes, and polls closed 7 o'clock local time. Sanders did well there in 2016. Actually, in all three of these states, Sanders did well in 2016. So it'll be interesting to see how many of those states flip. But I think, as you said, the state he really has to win if he wants to, have something to be happy about tonight is Washington State. So, Joe, I think the polls still haven't closed yet in Washington, but what can you tell us about what to expect there?
Yeah, well, Washington, the polls close in about 45 minutes. And just real quick, Mike, going off what you were saying about Idaho and North Dakota and the size of the delegate distribution that those two states have, they combine for just 34 delegates tonight. Mississippi alone has 36. So even if you cancel those two out with Mississippi, Senator Sanders needs a convincing win in Washington to stay alive, because Joe Biden has right now comfortable lead in Michigan. He's blowing Senator Sanders out in Missouri. So Washington really could be the saving grace tonight for Senator Sanders. And it's really interesting because if you look at a poll in Washington that was conducted February 26th by Elway Research, keep in mind there were still 7 major candidates in the field on February 26th. Joe Biden was polling in 5th place with just 10%. In the last 2 days, polls conducted by both Survey USA and Data for Progress have the former vice president defeating Senator Sanders in a state that he defeated Hillary Clinton with 72% of the vote 4 years ago. They have Joe Biden now winning by 1 to 3 points, both within the margin of error, but both too close for comfort if you're Senator Sanders.
Yeah, it's really a remarkable turnaround for Joe Biden. And what do you attribute it to?
He's Lazarus in the
Yeah,
21st century.
literally.
I mean, that's exactly what it is. I really think it's because Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, Tom Steyer, and Mike Bloomberg have dropped out. That their supporters are now all uniting behind who they find is the less polarizing, more moderate candidate and more electable in a general election against Donald Trump in the eyes of the voters who were leaning towards Mayor Pete, leaning towards Amy Klobuchar. I also think it comes down to the drastic shift in caucus voting versus primary voting. 14 caucuses back in 2016, and Senator Sanders won, I believe, 11 of those. Just 3 caucuses here in 2020.
Yeah, I think he's the type of candidate who would, resonate better in a caucus setting, which apparently we're seeing that he did, and maybe one of the reasons why he's not performing as well as he did in 2016.
Absolutely. If you look at the way caucuses are formatted, they're set up for more polarizing candidates, meaning the most conservative of the Republican, the most liberal of the Democrats. We all know Senator Sanders, not even a Democrat, an independent from Vermont, is one of the most liberal candidates in any stage, any election that our country has. And so when you look at who he is most successful polling among, mainly younger voters, more raucous, loud, passionate voters, they're going to do better in a caucus setting. Joe Biden has controlled 3 main groups: African Americans, moderates, and older voters. None of them really seem to appear to be the caucus crowd that Senator Sanders has. And so when you see 11 states move in these past 4 years from a caucus to a primary, that really hurts Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. Mike Hogan, what are your thoughts? Are you similar to Joe's in terms of why Joe Biden is has the momentum now?
Yeah, two very good points by Joe. I just think there's a growing sense of voters in the United States that want to see Trump out of office, and I really think Democrats and everyone else thinks that Joe Biden gives the best chance to do that.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm seeing too. That there's such a strong desire among Democrats to defeat Donald Trump, and what I've been hearing on some of the talk shows is that for the first time in a long time, the Democratic Party is actually acting like a unified party, coming up with a plan saying, if our goal is to get a Democrat elected, we have to stop attacking each other. We have to unite behind the strongest candidate. And obviously the Sanders people are not happy with that, but the numbers are what they are. And Biden's been on a roll. Looks like that roll is going to continue tonight. And maybe on to the next couple of primaries. So we're going to take one more break, and then we're going to come back and wrap up with some final thoughts on tonight's primaries. So, thanks again for watching. Hold on, and we'll be back in a minute or
I see the future is really bright for me. The high school diploma is just added to the confidence, and now I feel unstoppable.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Meet the scan, a simple procedure whose mission is to detect lung cancer early.
I'm here to save you.
But I feel fine.
That's great, but you may still be at high risk for lung cancer.
Oh man, that's a new fence.
If you smoke, early detection could save your life. Learn more at savedbythescan.org.
Good evening, and thanks again for sticking with us here in SBU-TV's coverage of Super Tuesday 2. 6 states voting tonight for the Democratic primary. And I spent a lot of time earlier talking about Mississippi, of course, the prominent African-American electorate. 70% of Democrats in Mississippi are African-American. I mentioned how Hillary Clinton had won in 2016. It was her biggest win by 66 points. Well, currently, as you can see, former Vice President Joe Biden leading by 66 points with about 51% of the vote in. It was enough to call early, enough to give him 18 pledged delegates. That's half of Mississippi's 36 thus far. Senator Sanders still has not earned a single pledged delegate. So Joe Biden so far has swept the first half of Mississippi's delegates. You look at some of the bigger counties that Mississippi has. Hinds County, home of the capital, Jackson, Mississippi, where he leads 82-15, pretty on par with how he's doing in the grand scheme of the state. You go down to Harrison County, Gulfport, which is the second most populated city in the state of Mississippi, and a substantial lead there, 75.5% to 20.5% of the county's votes. You take a look at Missouri, a state that was incredibly nail-bitingly close in 2016. Joe Biden so far leading with 59% as opposed to just 34% for Senator Sanders, and he's more than doubled the delegate total from Senator Sanders in Missouri. Mike, we spent a lot of time talking about the 3 M's, Michigan, Missouri, Mississippi. What's been more surprising to you so far, Michigan's outcome or Missouri's?
I think Michigan's outcome's a little bit surprising to me based on the fact of what happened in 2016. You saw Hillary Clinton was predicted to win by double digits there, but didn't. I kind of had a sense that maybe it will happen again tonight, but the predictions were accurate this time around for Joe Biden. I'm sure he's very thankful for that.
Yeah, I'm a little bit, I guess if I have to be surprised by one, it's Missouri for some of the points that you were making, but overall I'm not surprised that Joe Biden's doing well all over. And I'm looking back at the states that Bernie Sanders did well in 2016, the last 3 we talked about, and one theory that I have is, Hillary Clinton was a presumptive nominee. If you think back to the 2016 election, there was a lot of discontent among voters that neither party was happy with the candidate they had, and I'm wondering if some of those Sanders votes, might have been protest votes, that they knew Hillary Clinton was going to get the nomination, but they, wanted to vote for someone else, and perhaps that's why, Sanders did as well as he did in those states. Do you think that's a possibility?
I think it absolutely is. Look, there's no doubt Hillary Clinton was a qualified candidate. Was she the most likable? Well, the results have showed us that she wasn't, because even though she defeated Bernie Sanders in the primary, there were a lot of votes, a lot of write-in votes for the senator, or protest votes for Gary Johnson, the Libertarian, for Jill Stein, the Green Party representative. There were a lot of protest votes in 2016 that prevented, ultimately, Hillary Clinton from winning the White House. And so I agree with that point completely. I think Joe Biden, especially because he was the vice president of Barack Obama, because he has decades of serving the working class, I think that he is a more likable candidate for the whole of the Democratic Party.
Yeah. Okay, and as we said at the outset, as well as Biden's doing, he's still got a ways to go to get to that magic number of 1991, which is why we're going to be back here next week, a week from tonight, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, when there's 577 delegates up for grabs as Arizona, Florida, Illinois, and Ohio will be holding primaries. And we're going to do one more. We picked April 28th, which is the date of the New York primary, but just it's a strong possibility that might be a night when one candidate wraps it up, because there's going to be 663 delegates decided that night: Delaware, Maryland, New York, which we mentioned, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island. So just going to wrap up by asking Joe and Mike your thoughts on, at this point, do you think even though he doesn't have the numbers, that Joe Biden has wrapped up the nomination?
It's looking very, very possible that that's the case, and especially when you look at what's coming up: Arizona, Florida, Illinois, Ohio, all those states where Hillary Clinton, she won there in 2016, and the expectation is that Biden will at least take 2 or 3 of those states next week. So I think Biden is in very good position right now.
Yeah. What about you, Jeff?
Yeah, well, Mike, you mentioned those 4 states next Tuesday that we'll be covering. I wouldn't say it's wrapped up just yet. I think a lot of that truthfully depends on the results that we get from Washington later in the evening and the early hours of the morning. But I think that if Joe Biden wins Ohio, Illinois, Florida, and maybe even Arizona, I'll give Senator Sanders the edge in Arizona as of now because of his success with the Latino vote. But if Joe Biden wins 3 out of those 4 states next Tuesday, I really think it is all but over. One other key point that I think really helps Joe Biden's campaign at the moment, this outbreak and scare of the COVID-19 virus, the coronavirus, of course. When I referenced that poll earlier taken in the days after Super Tuesday, 65% of the people polled said that they wanted Joe Biden because he gave them the best chance to handle a major crisis. Well, right now, this is on the verge of a major crisis. Just 23% of those voters say that Senator Sanders is best equipped to handle that. This doesn't look like it's getting better before it gets any worse.
Yeah, as we said, the coronavirus, one way or another, is probably going to be a factor in the race. And my own thoughts is I think Joe Biden's certainly in great position, but I've been following politics long enough, been involved in politics long enough. I'm not ready to, I've seen a lot of things turn around quickly. So that's why we'll be back again next week, following the race. So thanks everyone for watching. This has been great for the three of us to talk politics, get you some results. So I want to thank Joe Cirillo, Mike Hogan. Special thanks to Mike Spong for directing us, and the SBU-TV crew. So keep an eye on all of our social media accounts. We'll be posting updates throughout the week, and we'll be back again live a week from tonight, March 17th at 10 p.m. Thanks and good night.